Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, 300 Ghanaians back home from South Africa on an emergency repatriation flight for nationals fleeing anti-immigrant protests, threats and attacks in the continent's top economy. Also, rights organisation Human Rights Watch accuses the United Arab Emirates of having recruited Colombian mercenaries to send to Sudan in support of the RSF paramilitary, which is one half of the combatants in a conflict behind the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And as Muslims around the world begin to celebrate Eid al-Adha in eastern DR Congo, the Muslim holiday has begun with a focus on health and safety rather than celebration amidst the ongoing Ebola outbreak. But first, 300 Ghanaians evacuated from South Africa landed in Accra on Wednesday. Now, they are the first of 800 of Accra's nationals that have asked their embassy for help in Pretoria as they rush to return home after a month of xenophobic attacks there. The repatriation was organised because of growing concerns about the safety of foreigners, increasingly targeted amidst demonstrations against illegal migration and the scarcity of jobs in Africa's top economy. Our Justice Baidu was at the airport when the Ghanaian returnees touched down.
Most of the returnees had been accused of living and working in South Africa without the required paperwork. Ghana's government chartered the flight that airlifted these returnees from Johannesburg that landed in Accra Wednesday afternoon. These 300 persons included toddlers and many others who said that they had been attacked by angry mobs on the streets of South Africa.
They arrested me and my little girl 2 years ago while she was 2 years. So whilst I'm home, I think I'm okay and I'm very, very safe at home.
It was a terrible experience, like something like traumatizing, without peace. You're always scared, afraid. So it's best if I'm home. I have kids also. I can't just stay there with kids and then put them at danger.
At the airport, the Ghanaian government had organized a big reception of senior government officials that also included mental health workers that were at hand to give these returnees the psychological support needed for proper reintegration.
Today, we send a clear message. Ghanaians have a caring government. Ghanaians are valued. Ghanaians are loved. Ghanaians are cherished. And if you mess around with Ghanaians anywhere in the world, thinking that they are orphaned or nobody cares about them, you are mistaken.
From the airport, these returnees are being supported to travel across the countries to their various hometowns.
Justice Baidu there for us in Accra. Now, rights organisation Human Rights Watch says that the United Arab Emirates recruited Colombian mercenaries to send to Sudan in support of the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, paramilitary. Now, the RSF is on one side of a brutal power struggle with the army that has raged on since 2023, causing the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Colombia's own president has referred to the mercenaries as the spectres of death. Their presence adds to the grim pressures on civilians caught up in this conflict. Although the UAE denies its involvement, researchers say that there is extensive evidence to the contrary. Our East African correspondent Bastien Renouy tells us more.
These mercenaries were recruited by a former Colombian soldier called Álvaro Andrés Quireno, a man who was under US sanctions for his work in Sudan. Once recruited, they are paid by a UAE-based company whose CEO is linked to the Emirati government, according to Human Rights Watch. The NGO spoke to former mercenaries. Some of them said that they were able to travel to the UAE without a visa and that they trained in a military base in Abu Dhabi before traveling to Sudan. In Darfur, some of them trained members of the Rapid Support Forces, including child soldiers. Others were seen using mortars to target the city of El Fashir during the siege of the city before October 2025. And at that time, the city was full of civilians, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. And finally, Human Rights Watch gathered evidence and testimonies of massacres in and around the city. And according to several survivors, some of these mercenaries were standing next to members of the Rapid Support Forces watching these massacres. So all these actions are war crimes and could potentially be crimes against humanity. So Human Rights Watch is now calling on the UAE government to stop financing the war in Sudan, to stop sending mercenaries in Darfur as well. But in the past, the UAE denied being involved in Sudan, despite many evidences.
A breakdown there for us from Bastien Rennery. Now, Ethiopia heads into elections next week. The ruling Prosperity Party is expected to saunter to victory, and some opposition figures have called for nationwide protests over a vote they say is going to be undemocratic. Now, a rally would be risky, as it hasn't been approved by the National Election Board, and tensions are already high. Some opposition parties are also warning that they're worried for their own safety. Tom Canetti tells us more.
Ahead of the upcoming elections, I sat down with the Secretary-General of the EPRP, an opposition party that says that the necessary preconditions for a democratic vote have not been met, and called for a nationwide protest calling for the release of political prisoners, restrictions to be lifted from the press, and an end to the conflict across Ethiopia. But the party is still haunted by a protest that it held in 2024.
Yes, we are scared that imprisonment and even assassination is going to happen to the leaders, because it's already been done before. 2 years ago, we tried to host a rally here in Addis. Its main motto was, stop war and bring peace. But the government detained our leaders and sent them to our Sharba, a built-in camp, a military camp, used for an informal detention. It's like a hell in earth. I don't know if you are already familiar to it. So yes, we expect the worst things to happen, because we are trying to hold a rally in Addis and some other cities.
The Ethiopian government asserts that this will be a free election, and there are 47 opposition parties registered for the vote, including the EPRP. But since this interview took place, the EPRP postponed the nationwide protest it had called for and has not confirmed whether it will take place in the future.
Well, South Africa and activists from its Afrikaner white minority have contradicted US President Donald Trump's administration's allegations that white people in South Africa are facing a humanitarian emergency. Now, the US is using that argument as a justification for raising its refugee cap, but only for white Afrikaners, allowing an extra 10,000 into the United States of America. Washington says that 6,000 South Africans have moved to the US since the Afrikaner program began last year. Mounting regional pressure from DR Congo's Ebola outbreak led Uganda to close the border with its neighbor on Wednesday, a move that goes against World Health Organization advice. Now, 7 cases have been logged in Uganda, with at least 1 death. The caseload there may not be spiking, but Kampala is not taking any chances.
The only exceptions are for authorized Ebola response teams, the humanitarian operations, the food and cargo transportation, and security. But all this still will be under the strict health screening and monitoring protocols.
Well, as Muslims around the world begin to celebrate Eid al-Adha in eastern DR Congo, the Muslim holiday has begun with a focus on health and safety rather than celebration. Another of the social effects of the Ebola outbreak. Clem Valla tells us more.
Wearing their bright yellow vests, volunteers help families take precautions before gathering for communal prayer. For these Congolese worshippers, this year's Eid celebrations have been dampened due to the Ebola virus affecting Bunia, considered the epicenter of the outbreak, and the rest of Ituri province.
To be honest, this year's Eid celebration is not like usual. Usually every celebration is a joyous event for Muslims. They gather in one place to pray, to visit each other, but given the Ebola outbreak, there is a decrease in excitement.
First of all, we are grateful to have reached this day of prayer. We didn't know whether we would be able to gather to pray because of this terrible disease. People are dying, but we thank God for His strength.
Local authorities have banned mass prayers in stadiums. Worshippers must now gather at their respective mosques. Other health precautions to follow include wearing masks and practicing social distancing in places of worship in order to limit the spread of the disease.
The authorities have taken measures which require us to pray individually in our own respective mosques while observing safety protocols, particularly the 1 meter social distancing rule.
The head of the WHO, Tedros Ghebreyesus, is expected to visit Bunia on Thursday.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, though, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.